right. Well, there we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I think this is our 13th live event for classrooms on the other side of the planet. Not too long ago, the Oosterschedle was pretty close to Australia and New Zealand in the Pacific Ocean. Since then, we've spent 7 weeks crossing that ocean. We've now spent several weeks crossing the Atlantic Ocean. And if I update you here with our map, let me share my screen, you will see that we're about to finish that crossing of the Atlantic Ocean. So if I back out a little bit here, you can see we've crossed the Atlantic Ocean. We had our stop in South Georgia. We were going to try and make a stop in Tristan da Cunha, which was the most remote inhabited island on the planet. About 200 people live there. Unfortunately, the weather just didn't cooperate, so we weren't able to make that stop along the way. But we are just days away from reaching the continent of Africa for the first time. Cape Town, South Africa. I think today's the 26th, probably the 27th. On the other part in Australia where you guys are. So we should be there on the 29th. So we're not that far away from reaching Cape Town. If we update by clicking on our photos, we can get a little look at what's been going on the ship. So if we pick this one here, you can see that we're getting a little lesson here on using a form of navigation called the sextant, which is something that could be used without, GPS like we have. It's what sailors used to use hundreds of years ago, navigating using the sun, and a cool little instrument called the sextant. So we're having a lesson here on board the ship. If I back up in time a little bit, you can see that it wasn't all smooth sailing. Look at these seas here. You can see the ship is on quite an angle. You can see all of that water rushing in behind. And then if I back up a little more, we got a little video. You can see some of that action. Let's take a look here. So we definitely had worse weather, but there was a good little bit of wind here. And there's some good movement as well. Not like we had a few weeks ago when we were still in the Pacific. Let's look at one more little video clip here from the ship. Definitely colder, definitely wetter. Not a lot of sails up. There's so much wind. You can see the ship's moving along pretty good. It looks like there's one more new update. I haven't even seen this one. So let's take a look at this brand new video getting close to the shore. Let's see. Oh, whales. Very cool. Probably humpback whales from that picture. Oh, here we go. We're getting a better view. I don't think that's a humpback whale. I can't see kind of those telltale big, long, white. Usually you can see their big, long flippers, but I don't see them there. So we'll have to check in with Josh and Grant on board and find out what kind of whale that was. I don't think that was a humpback. So I'll find out next time I talk to them. But there's a nice, there we go, tails up. And there it goes. I wonder if that was a sperm whale. Looking at the tail, it might have been. We'll see if I was right. Could have been a sperm whale, or you get lots of southern right whales around this area of Africa as well. Hopefully we'll see some over the few weeks that the Oosterschedle will be in Cape Town. Very cool. Okay, I'm going to come back from that screen share, and we got to get into this event because we have a lot to cover in our time together today. So the first thing I want to do is, not too long ago, I had a little video update with Grant on board the ship. I don't know if we've had Grant in one of our events before. We've had Josh, we've had Tom and Mara, but Grant wasn't on board for the entire crossing of the Pacific and most of what we were up to in Australia. So he just got on board before the ship left the Falklands. So Grant is a researcher. He has been on board for pretty much the entire journey. He has to take breaks from time to time, but he's on board for most of the journey, and he's been undertaking a project, a seabird survey, the entire way around the world. We've spotted over 600 different species of birds documented during the survey, and that's kind of his main project. Of course, he helps out with some of the other science on board. He's got a really cool project as well we're going to learn about shortly. but I was able to connect with Grant a few days ago. Josh was feeling a little under the weather, and Grant was able to do a recording with me because right now they're sleeping. So we have a little recording, and we're going to get to meet Grant and catch up on some of the project he's working on. So give me a moment here to share my screen, and then we're going to hop on board, and we will see what Grant has to tell us today. Grant, how are you?
Hi, everybody. Doing great. We've got a calm day for sailing.
Yeah, it looks like since you left South Georgia, it looks like you had a few rough days.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to fool you with these like tranquil seas behind me. We had some days where we were really surfing.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Grant, it's been a while since we've caught up because before this leg, we had a massive 7-week crossing of the Pacific Ocean. So it's been a while since you've been on board. It's good to see you.
Yeah. It's been good to be back. Get back into the swing of doing all the bird surveys and everything.
Yeah, very cool. And so, yeah, that's one of the big roles you have is basically this global bird survey as we sail around the world. I think you were saying we're approaching 600 species. That's pretty special.
Yeah, so 600 species, and that's 600 species that we've counted over a series of it's been 900 hour-long counts that I've conducted so far.
Wow.
So all that is this raw data that we're contributing for the scientific community.
Yeah, very cool. I should mention as well, I think I still have the map here. If you check out the map at DARWIN200.com in your classroom, there's a little bird icon. And if you click on that, it highlights some of the list that Grant has made as the ship sailed around the world. So that's pretty cool. You can check out some of the observations as the ship was making its way around the world. They kind of show up as these glowing patches throughout those parts of the journey. And Grant, you've also been working on your own project out on some of those islands in the Pacific.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm not sure if anybody remembers, but we were in French Polynesia last year, and I was able to organize and get funding to do my own documentary project on some of the rare animals that are on some of those islands in French Polynesia. So I've been working this leg on trying to get everything together so that the documentary is ready for viewing.
All right. And it just so happens you sent me a little trailer for some of the work you've been doing.
Yeah, I'd love to show it off. It's a beautiful trailer.
All right. Give me a moment here to get the video queued up. Make sure I pick the right video, and then let's take a look at this little trailer so far.
Surrounded by dense jungle and vibrant birds, you'd be forgiven for thinking that I'm in a rainforest somewhere. But here, in one of the most remote corners of the Pacific, I couldn't be farther away from the nearest continental landmass. Stretching across an area larger than Western Europe, the Tuamotu Tropical Forest spans the largest chain of coral islands in the world. This creates a unique ecosystem. But how did these islands come to be? And how did they become home to such a unique cast of plants and animals? Finally, how have these island communities been shaped by the forces of evolution and extinction? Although it's easy to imagine that these islands are untouched paradises, in reality, they face severe environmental challenges. From the introduction of alien species to the industrial scale exploitation of resources, and even the wholesale destruction of entire islands. Against such odds, the survival of the Tuamotu forest is far from assured. In this two-part film, join us as we explore this forgotten world. How we're gonna get there, I don't exactly know yet. And we meet the fascinating creatures that call it home. This is Tuamotu.
All right, Grant, that's looking pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a project that I'm super proud of. I'm so happy that we were able to get it off the ground. It was kind of my little idea, and then we went to these islands to film some of these animals that even biologists know almost nothing about. And so trying to give these little islands and this like overshadowed ecosystem a little bit of a spotlight.
Yeah. And I love that drone shot. It's a pretty epic drone shot of you on the island and then pulling back just to give a little bit of perspective. And then, islands are pretty unique across the Pacific, and the way that birds move from island to island, and then they can change and evolve. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely one of the big themes of this film, is about how islands are sort of laboratories for evolution. It's often pure chance that especially land birds and a lot of land animals will make their way to remote islands. And when they get there, the way that they kind of associate with other types of animals and plants, and they build a complex ecosystem in the middle of the ocean, is something that I find really fascinating, and that's definitely a big part of the story that we're trying to tell.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to see the finished two-part film. That's going to be pretty great. I know you're probably pretty busy right now. I think you mentioned scripting earlier.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of editing going on. Yeah, huge undertaking, but I bet it's going to feel pretty good when it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's shaping up to be 2 45-minute episodes, so it's a big project.
Yeah. So before we let you go, Grant, I'm going to just invite our classrooms. We have classrooms tuning in online. Don't be shy. If you have any questions for Grant about the bird survey, life on the ship, visiting South Georgia, feel free to put some in the chat. If you are a camera classroom and you have a question for Grant, just give me a wave at the camera, and that'll be my signal to bring you in for a little question. But just before we do that, Grant, I want to share a few photos you sent to me today. So let's take a look at, I think there's 6 photos, and then we will check for some questions from our classrooms. So let's grab those photos. And first one here should come up now. There we go. Looks like you had a visitor.
Yeah, so this is it's the smallest kind of seabird. It's called a storm petrel. And one of these days that we were sailing around South Georgia, we had just crazy winds that we were fighting against. And this little storm petrel happened to be blown right into one of our sails. And so when that happened, the storm petrel fell to the deck. And because these guys, they really can't take off directly from bare ground, it needed a little assistance getting off the ship. So we got a chance to snap a couple of photos.
Yeah, very cool. That's not the only visitor. Your ship being out there, it's kind of a little beacon for birds that might need a little bit of a rest. I think I've seen boobies. I think you might have had really early on in the expedition a wren taking a little break on the ship. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's always exciting.
All right, and there's that story. Is that the same storm petrel?
That's a different one, but just for reference of
Sure.
what they kind of look like on the waves.
Okay. And then there we go. There's our second biggest penguins.
Yeah, Oh my gosh, they were so cool. You know, one of the fun things about the penguins on South Georgia is that they tell you that you're supposed to keep a distance of like 10 meters from all of the wildlife. And it's funny because you'll go onto the beaches and all of the wildlife comes right up to you. Like it's absolutely impossible to remain or to keep that kind of distance. And the penguins especially were so curious. They would just come up and check you out, and they really just try to see what's going on there.
Yeah, I think you guys get the rules, but the wildlife definitely doesn't get those rules in places, especially on
Absolutely.
islands. Like obviously South Georgia, Galapagos is very similar. Very cool.
Absolutely.
Here's a scavenger bird, right? These guys are predators too.
Yeah, so these guys, a lot of people call them like the vultures of the ocean. This is a giant petrel, and they like to hang around penguin colonies in case there are any deaths or any kind of like weak animals. And then these guys seize the opportunity.
All right, fur seals.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't know if you've heard Josh talk about these, but the fur seals, especially the really young ones, are really bold. They like to kind of show off how tough they are. And so again, like with the whole 10-meter thing, the fur seals charge up to people and will just start snarling and everything and like want to make a big display. And then you have to shoo them away so that they don't bite you. So you have to start clapping your hands and saying no, you don't, and be big and threatening to then chase the baby fur seals away. And so like that's another thing that's just like pretty wild that I think will always stay with me, is like that feeling of like being pursued by a bunch of baby fur seals.
All right. And so this is pretty much what makes me the most jealous of everything so far. I can't believe you got to see this.
That was crazy. So we had all of the researchers. There were like 40 researchers in Grytviken, and everybody was like crowding around this leopard seal, which beached itself on on South Georgia there, because I guess this is a relatively rare site that they get to see in South Georgia. I said there are people that have been working on South Georgia at Grytviken for the last year, and they've never seen a leopard seal before. So it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, these are like dinosaur-looking predators. They are penguin menaces. I mean, they are pretty cool. Usually like around Antarctica, so that was pretty special.
Absolutely. And this one was it was a younger individual. It was about like 7 feet long, but that's a baby leopard seal.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, and then I think here we've got a prion. So prions are probably one of the most abundant birds that we've been seeing on this leg. They're small seabirds, and they're super cool because most prions have these little filaments in their beaks that are almost like the bristles on a toothbrush. And much like the way that whales are filtering water to get krill, these guys are filtering water to filter out small invertebrates that they're eating, like especially like little like shrimp like copepods and things like that, just really tiny animals. And so around South Georgia especially, there's big upwellings of marine nutrients, and that leads to these big blooms of zooplankton, and that's what is feeding like just flocks of thousands and thousands of these prions. We saw so many of them.
All right, and then that little landscape photo here.
Well, and I think especially for me, like the icebergs were one of the most fun things. Getting to sail around so many icebergs of all different shapes and sizes. I had fun just like commenting on like sort of like the artistic quality of each iceberg with some of the guests. We were kind of like rating and coming up with what the museum descriptions would be for different icebergs. Like some of them were like, more cubist, and some of them were, a little bit more triangular, but it was super fun getting to see so many icebergs.
Okay, that's the end of our photos, but I want to play one little clip that Josh sent me to highlight our penguins. So let me pull that up here, and then we're going to go to a little Q&A action before we let you go. Gold Harbor, here we go. All right, so what are we figuring? About 1 million penguins?
So in Gold Harbor, it's one of the largest. It's one of the 4 largest colonies on South Georgia. This was about like 60,000 king penguins, but it's so many. The largest colony on South Georgia was at I think it was called St. Andrews Bay, which had about 500,000 pairs. So,
wow.
or I think it's 500,000 individuals.
But
But not all of the birds, elephant seals, those guys were absolutely enormous.
There's our little fur seals.
Gen 2 penguins as well. The Gen 2 penguins were definitely a lot less bold than the kings. They wouldn't come up to you, and they were kind of just like minding their own business.
Wow. It's like a bustling little city there. Very cool. Okay, well, let's grab
so much going on. I think so sorry.
No, don't worry, Grant. I think there's a slight delay too.
Of course. I think all of us were just really stricken by stepping off of the boat onto the beach there in Gold Harbor, and just like it felt like we were, in the middle of like, a bustling Serengeti or something like that. Just getting to see all these different animals interacting with each other, and just to see like such sheer abundance in one place. It was also just a spectacular scene. I mean, there were glaciers coming right up onto the beach, and like waterfalls coming down from the glaciers, and the sun was setting over the glaciers, like, glinting like all of the ice, and like it was really a spectacular sight.
Wow, awesome, so cool. Let's get a few questions in. So from Seven Oaks Prep in the UK, they would like to know your favorite bird so far and why.
Ooh, my favorite bird so far would probably be similar to one of the birds that was in the film, the trailer that I showed. So I don't know if you guys noticed the little green pigeon-like bird that was at the very beginning. That's a bird that they live on tropical islands in the Pacific. They're called fruit doves. I think the fruit doves that we've seen have probably been some of my favorite birds.
Okay, there we go. So that was a little update from Grant on board the ship. Tomorrow, when we have our event for classrooms, kind of North America area, we will have another update as they're getting close to the shore. So we'll be sure to share that with you next time. And hopefully we'll have some cool footage from Cape Town to share with you as well. So I do see some questions in the chat from some students. I'll do my best to answer them. I should be able to answer most of them. And Troy, we heard the answer to his favorite bird so far was that little fruit pigeon he saw on one of the islands. They are spread across those islands in the Pacific, and every species just a little bit different because they made it out to those islands. They were separate from each other for so long. They changed over time, adapted to their environment, and became a kind of a string of different fruit dove species. So I think that species, it was down to really low numbers, maybe as low as 100. So being able to see them in the wild is pretty cool. And on a lot of those islands, there's a lot of conservation efforts underway to try and protect them. Ruva, animals. I think that at this stage, they've just lost count on board the ship. From whales to dolphins to birds to mammals on land, reptiles, lizards. It's just, I would say probably over 1,000 different species. And if we had to count the exact number, it would be in the millions because, some of those places like the Falklands, where we were visiting, the Galapagos, South Georgia, on one beach, there can be like 100,000 penguins. So, yeah, pretty awesome. So why did Grant start that research? Well, Grant is working to get his full education. He's working to become, on his PhD. So he has to have a project, something that he can work on, something that he can complete, and then defend that project to get his doctorate. So birds are something he's really passionate about. I think Grant would be the first person to say he's a bit of a bird nerd, and he just loves birds. And so it seemed like a really great project for him because it's an area of the world where very few people get to visit and do research. So, he was really excited to have that chance. Any dangerous birds? Not really. When we get to Africa, hopefully we'll see some ostriches. And ostriches aren't really dangerous because if you just leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. But if you get too close to an ostrich, they're taller than a person, and they can kick really powerfully with their legs. So hopefully we get to see some ostriches, but obviously we're not going to get too close because we don't want to upset the ostrich. You don't want to get kicked by an ostrich. It wouldn't be very good. And actually, in Australia, in Queensland, when I visited, well, I was there in November, but the time I visited before, I was up in the Daintree rainforest, and we saw some cassowaries in the wild. And they can be about 5-6 feet tall, and they have big, powerful kicks as well if you get too close to a cassowary, especially if it has its chicks around. So those are definitely dangerous birds if you get too close. Masis, what animals are becoming extinct? Unfortunately, there's a lot to choose from. There's some species around the world where they're down to just a handful of them. A good example is the northern white rhinos that you can find in Kenya. There are only 2 northern white rhinos left on the planet. So, unfortunately, all over the world, due to human impact, climate change, biodiversity loss, we're losing animals. In fact, I just shared a video the other day about the Darwin's frog, which is being impacted by chytrid fungus. And the zoo in London had to do an emergency trip out to Chile, catch as many as they could in the wild, and then bring them back to the zoo in London to keep them and breed them in captivity, hoping that one day they can be released back into the wild again. So, yeah, unfortunately, all over the world, we're losing plants and animals. Annabelle, the biggest bird, definitely the albatross that they saw so far, although the ostrich will probably beat it because the ostrich is pretty tall. But the albatross has a wingspan of, the biggest one, the wandering albatross, has a wingspan of 11 feet. So measure that out, 11 feet. And imagine a bird that has its wings stretched out that long. They're like big gliders. They can stay off land for over a year at a time, finding the food they need out in the ocean, sitting on the ocean and relaxing if they need to. But they just kind of drift along, follow the currents, the air over the waves, and can do that pretty much indefinitely. Okay, let's get into some experiment action. So the first thing I want to do with our experiments is we have a really cool class in South Australia who's always hanging out with us on these events. We love to have them with us. And they asked if I could share, because we did the pitfall experiment weeks ago, but they sent us in some photos and asked if I could share them today. So I think that would be a great idea. So give me a second to share my screen and let's take a look at that together. Here we go. So the pitfall trap, for those who may be new to it, we wanted to see what was going on around your houses, around your schools. Maybe you have a little park or something. And so what you do is you take something like a glass jar or a plastic container, you bury it so that it's kind of underground with just the lid. And then you put something inside, maybe some old banana, maybe some biscuits, something like that. And then invertebrates will come along, attracted to the food. They'll fall in. They won't be able to get out. And then you can check them out. So here we go. It looks like they had 4 jars. They used cheese, sweet biscuit, banana, and apple. They went to the garden beds in their schoolyard. They labeled the jars. That's pretty good. And then you can see them getting ready. They're putting their bait in those jars. They dug their holes. There's their labels. Very cool. And let's scroll down a little bit more and see what happened. 24 hours, nothing. So they tried another spot to see if that would work. Set up their jars. What did they get? Nothing. But let's see. They were hoping they would have caught something like an earwig, a snail, or a millipede. But looks like they tried their best. And that's sometimes how science works. And they did something really smart, is they didn't give up after the first try. They tried a new spot to see what would happen. And unfortunately, sometimes it just doesn't work out. I guess there was nothing interested in their biscuit or cheese, their apple or banana. But it's so cool to see students getting out there and trying these experiments. And that's what we're going to do right now. Because we didn't have time to do one last week, we ran out of time. I have a brand new experiment that we're going to check out this week. And it should be something you can try in your classroom and find the materials pretty easily. So let's take a look at this brand new experiment. I'm going to share a video, and our brand new experiment should come up right now.
Welcome back, everyone. This week's experiment explores the differing conditions that plant seeds need in order to germinate and grow. Every species of plant on Earth has slightly different conditions and requirements in order for it to grow healthily and the seeds to germinate. Some plant species grow only in freshwater conditions. Others are tolerant of salt. Others like warm temperatures or cold temperatures, and some can tolerate shadowy conditions and shade. Well, in this experiment, we're going to have a little look at some of those differing conditions. The first thing you need is the seeds of a plant that's fast growing. I really recommend cress seeds. Cress grows really quickly, so it's perfect for this experiment. Then you need to decide on what conditions you're going to run in this experiment to test the requirements of those seeds. I'm going to try and germinate seeds with fresh water, but using a dish to make shadow or shade, and last but not least, salty conditions using table salt that you can have at home. Okay, the first step you need to do is create some matrices for the seeds to germinate on. Paper towel works really, really well. So if you fold it up and put it into your dishes, and then I recommend adding a little bit of water just so that it holds the tissue paper down and the seeds then can stick to it quite nice and easily. So I've got those three ready. You don't have to use dishes, by the way. You could use any type of container. You could even use glass cups if you so prefer, or Petri dishes. But having a nice open bowl like this makes it very easy to observe. Then get roughly the same quantity of seed. I'm using a teaspoon here, and sprinkle those evenly onto your paper towels. It doesn't matter exactly how many seeds you germinate. You'll see the trends in the germination quite clearly and quite easily as they start to grow. Perfect. So for my first control, I'm going to add fresh water only. So let's add a little bit of fresh water here and see if those seeds grow. Don't inundate the seeds with water. You certainly don't want them to be floating, but you do want the entire paper towel to be wet so that all of the seeds are in contact with moisture. For my second experiment, I'm going to look at how shady conditions impact seed germination. I've got this little dish here that I'll put on top of my bowl to see how those dark conditions impact the germination. But first, add in a little bit of water to make that paper towel sufficiently moist so that all of the seeds are in contact with some moisture. Then I'll put that dish on top and we'll see if we get any germination in dark conditions. Last but not least, I really would like to test and see if salt impacts the germination of those seeds. So get a beaker, pour in a little bit of water, add some salt. Table salt from your dining table at home will work absolutely fine. I'm going to put in 4 little spoonfuls full. It doesn't really matter the exact quantity, but just make sure you give it a good mix so that it all dissolves, so that you have a nice solution of that salt to test the impact on those seeds. When the salt is dissolved, pour in a bit of that salt solution so that it definitely gets absorbed by the tissue paper, and then we'll see if salt water impacts the germination of those cress seeds. Now place your 3 dishes in a location that's brightly lit and warm, and make sure that all 3 dishes have exactly the same conditions so that it's a fair test, so you get a really good overview of the differences in germination. You have to leave them alone for about 4 to 5 days, but then come back and see if there's any differences in the germination of these seeds. Join me in 2 weeks' time to see the results of this experiment. You can do this at home and send in your results by completing the information sheet on the DARWIN200.com website. Send in your results over the next 2 weeks for a chance to win 3 £50 Amazon voucher prizes. Good luck, and see you in 2 weeks to find out the results of this exciting experiment.
Okay, so there we go. That is our experiment for the next 2 weeks. Cress seeds grow really fast, so you might be able to find some at the grocery store. Maybe there's a local garden center or something like that. Worst case scenario, you might be able to find a little packet online, something like Amazon or something, you might be able to get a little packet of cress seeds. They do grow really fast. So within 4, even 5 days, you will start to see them growing. So 2 weeks should be lots of time to see the difference in growing those seeds in those 3 different conditions. Of course, we want your pictures. We'd love to see your classrooms in action. You could try it at home as well. And then send those in to classroom@darwin200.com. And I will put that up on the screen. There we go, classroom@darwin200.com. Okay, well, the last thing I want to do today is something I did with classrooms in our previous event, with our classrooms in North America and the UK. And that is, we've looked at a lot of what's on the surface of the water, like the whales and the dolphins when they come to the surface, the birds and things like that. But I thought it'd be fun to take a look at what's under the water. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is how we're going to spend the rest of our time together, is checking out a cool presentation. So just bear with me for a second. It should come up shortly. Here we go. All right, so this should come up. Let's go full screen, see if it cooperates. And one more click. There we go, and I just have to swap the display. Okay. Hopefully that should be sharing for everyone now. So I was lucky enough a few years ago to go on a different ship, very different than the Oosterschedle, for 3 weeks off the coast of California. This was an ocean research vessel called the Exploration Vessel Nautilus. We spent 3 weeks using robots to explore parts of the ocean nobody has ever seen before. So a scuba diver can go to about 150 feet. I've been about 155 feet deep. You can train and go even deeper to 200, 300 feet. But once you're getting to depths like that, you're pretty much getting as far down as humans can dive and still be safe. So if we want to explore 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers below the ocean, we need to use technology. And that's where robots come in, remotely operated vehicles. So that's the story I want to share with you today, is my time on this ocean vessel and what we found while we explored the deep sea. So when I got to California, I could not get on the boat without doing some scuba diving first. And so California is famous for its kelp forests. Kelp forests are beautiful underwater habitats full of biodiversity and different types of life. And kelp forest grows really fast. In some species of kelp can grow up to 1 meter in a day. So that's what the forest looks like from above. And then this is what it looks like from underwater. Let me just hit play on this little video. I am on the right, and that's another friend of mine. And we've got a National Geographic flag because we're both National Geographic explorers. So we were diving in the kelp forest. We brought one of our National Geographic flags with us. On land, the forests are pretty cool too. These redwood trees are some of the tallest in the world. So exploring that forest on land was really exciting. And then we kind of explored one more kind of forest. And this is a smaller forest, but it's the forest you can find in tide pools, seaweed and kelp and things like that. So twice a day, the tide comes in, we get high tide. Twice a day, the tide goes out, we get our low tide. At the low tide, it forms pools in the rock, and creatures always get stuck in those little pools, and they have to wait there until the water comes back up again. And exploring tide pools is a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to find, like this crab here. We have this beautiful green colored sea anemone. This is a bat sea star. You can see it's out of the water. So this one, it will probably be fine. It can survive out of the water for a while, but the tide got so low that this one was left right out of the water. Here's another crab here in the water. You can see some seaweed around. And then those little kind of black balls with the little yellow on top, those are gastropods. They're a type of snail. And then the coolest thing of all we found on this night was a little baby octopus crawling around on those little seaweed mats. So here's a little closer picture of that little baby octopus. Pretty cool. But I couldn't spend all my time scuba diving and exploring forest. I had to get to the ship. So the ship was docked in San Francisco. So there's a picture of the skyline in San Francisco. And then here is the Exploration Vessel Nautilus. And there's all kinds of people on board. There's the crew, there's engineers, navigators, science communicators, scientists. We've got the cooks, of course. So there's a whole team on board that make it possible for this ocean expedition to happen. And they all have different roles, and everyone is important to make things go smoothly and collect all the data and research and share it, of course, because that's important as well. We sailed away from San Francisco, so that's San Francisco in the background. This is the Golden Gate Bridge. We sailed underneath. There's one more shot as we went under the bridge. And then what were we playing with? I mentioned robots. Well, here are the two big ones. This is Hercules. Hercules is a remotely operated vehicle. Hercules weighs about 5,000 pounds and costs millions and millions of dollars. It's covered in lights and cameras, different containers to take water samples, different arms to take samples of marine life and rocks that we can bring back up to the surface for the scientists. So if you take a look here, this is how we have to get Hercules in the water. It's so heavy, we use a big crane. We pick it up and we lower it down into the water. It's got little propellers, little engines all over it, so it can move up, down, side to side. That cord on the back is where the wires run back to the ship, so it stays powered and sends us information. And so this is what it looks like when Hercules is being lowered into the water. I'll watch this for another second. Crane's going down. And so Hercules is controlled by, there's navigators who keep an eye on what the ship is doing and where the ROV is. There's also the ROV pilots. It looks like they're playing a video game because the controller looks a lot like a video game controller that they use to control Hercules underwater. There we go, getting lowered into the water. In a second, you'll see the cable on the top disconnect, and then Hercules will start to drive off on its own. There we go. The second ROV goes in the water at the same time as Hercules. It's called Argus. So you can see it looks quite different. It's got a big camera on it. It's connected to the ship. This cable is over 4 kilometers long because the ROV, Hercules, can dive to about 4 kilometers. So we need a tether with the power and the cord that can be at least as long as the ROVs can be deep. And Argus always dives with Hercules because the ship is moving up and down. And then Argus is attached to Hercules by a cord. So Argus moves up and down with the ship, but Hercules is attached by a loose cord on the bottom. So when Argus goes up and down, Hercules doesn't move. It stays nice and stable, can get nice videos, nice pictures and things like that. So Argus has a camera to keep an eye on Hercules down below, and it also absorbs the movement of the ship. So Hercules can stay nice and stable. This is where we're exploring. This is the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Here's San Francisco, way up here where we left. And then way down here is Davidson Seamount. It's an extinct volcano. And this is where we were diving with the ROV. We were diving to depths of 3 and 4 kilometers, exploring parts of the ocean floor that no one has ever seen before. The thing is, we have better maps of Mars and the moon than we do of the bottom of our ocean. We've only mapped about 20% of the ocean. We still have a long way to go. A lot of the bottom of the ocean nobody has ever seen before, and we don't 100% know what it looks like. So we're trying to fix that problem with research vessels. So here we go. We've made it down to the bottom, the soft bottom. And you can see the first thing we saw here was this sea spider. It's actually called a pictogonin. It's not actually a spider, but it looks like one. And these lasers, you might be wondering what they are. These lasers are on Hercules, and they're 10 centimeters apart. So if we put these lasers on something we see that helps us estimate how big it is. So this is probably about 3 of these lasers, so maybe about 30 centimeters across, this sea spider. It's actually called a pictogonin, but looks a lot like a spider. Now we have to be careful because there's obstacles at the bottom of the ocean. This is an abandoned fishing net that sank to the bottom, and the ROV pilots have to be really careful because if Hercules gets tangled up at the bottom, it would be very difficult, if even possible, to retrieve Hercules from the bottom of the ocean, tangled in a fishing net. Now, food is always falling to the bottom of the ocean. It's something called marine snow. It's little particles of single-celled organisms like plankton and zooplankton. It can be bigger things all the way up to the size of a whale that dies and sinks to the bottom. And then it's a big feast at the bottom for the bottom-dwelling creatures. And here's a piece of kelp that drifted to the bottom. And these are sea pigs and sea urchins are having a feast on this piece of kelp that sank about 3 kilometers. Here we have typical of a kind of a bottom-dwelling fish. This is a lizard fish. It doesn't have any color because nothing can see it. It's usually completely dark. Its eyes don't actually work. It's got a big mouth for gulping down food. How does it find its food? Well, they have a lateral line system. This is like an extra sense they have that runs along their body. They can feel changes in pressure in the water. And if something swims over top, that's a good fit to eat. It'll snag it down there and eat it. Now, even though we're exploring places no humans ever been, that doesn't mean that there isn't evidence of humans. So this is a Dr. Pepper can that sank to the bottom. You can see this bristle star and this urchin near it. And then we saw paint cans and other cans and balloons and fishing nets, all kinds of garbage that was discarded or blew off of ships and then sank to the bottom. So we still have an impact. This is one of Hercules' arms. So there's a team of scientists who sit in the control van and they watch the videos. And they ask the ROV pilots, ooh, can you get that rock? Can you take this sea sponge sample? Can you grab this? And then they bring it up to the top. Sometimes it's too soft to pick up. So we have a hose that Hercules can use like a vacuum cleaner. It's called a slurp. And it can vacuum up like this sponge sample. It can vacuum up a sample for the scientists to look at. And then this bucket on the front is for putting rocks in. And this one here is where Hercules can drop in samples, pull them back inside to cover them up, and bring them back up to the surface for the scientists to check out. There's lots of life at the bottom of the ocean. Just in this little square here, we have a floating bristle star. We've got some deep sea coral, an acorn worm, a sea anemone, a sea cucumber. There's another bristle star. So just in this little tiny piece of the ocean floor, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different species right there. So there is a lot of life in the deep sea, a lot of stuff we haven't discovered yet. There are octopus down there. This scientific name is Moose octopus robustus. I don't know what the common name is, but I know it's called a Moose octopus robustus is its scientific name. And I'll tell you a story about these guys in a second. And then here's a really cool cusk eel. So this, again, can't really see because it's so dark underwater. Those little whiskers help it sense things in the water. And then if you look along its body, you can see that lateral line system again that helps it detect pressure and changes in the water around it. And I have a couple of video clips to share with you. So let me play the first one. I'm going to turn the volume down and I'll just talk over this video. So let me just grab the volume here quick. No, that's not it. Where's the volume? Oh, stop playing. Let's hit that again. There we go. All right, there we go. So what do we have here? Well, this has 2 different names. Sometimes people call it a Dumbo squid, or sometimes it's called an umbrella octopus. And so when we see things like this, it's really exciting because we don't get to see them a lot. They live so deep. And we also have a lot of questions like, is this rare or are they all over the deep sea? So we still have a lot to learn. And you can see it gets that name, the Dumbo squid, because those fins up on the top of its head look like ears, like the elephant Dumbo from the Disney movie. And then in a second, you'll see why it gets the name umbrella octopus. There we go. Look at the way those arms are attached by that thin layer of skin. And now it's just kind of showing off for the camera. So it's always exciting to spot things like this and be able to document it. And so while we're seeing this and recording it and filming it, we're also broadcasting it live every time the remotely operated vehicles are in the water. So people all around the world can tune in live and see these new discoveries, these new places at the same time as the scientists get to. So that's pretty cool. So there we go. That was pretty special. And then we'd had the ROVs in the water for about 40 hours. And it was time to bring them back up to the surface for a break. But just before we started, we noticed something weird on the bottom. We saw all these octopuses flipped upside down. There was about a dozen of them. And we thought that's kind of weird. So we went in to look closer. And what we notice, if you look carefully, you'll see that they're covering eggs. So they're brooding octopus, probably females, and they're turned upside down and they're protecting their eggs. Now they're going to spend 2 or 3 years doing this before those eggs will hatch. Then it got even stranger because we looked forward and we saw even more of them. So what started as a dozen, then maybe 2 dozen, turned into like 50, turned into 100, turned into hundreds, turned into thousands. As far as we could see on this seamount, we could see these octopuses flipped upside down in the little crevices all over this extinct volcano, this old seamount. And so it was really cool. We called it the Octopus Garden. This video went viral on YouTube. Thousands and thousands of people saw this video all over the world. So we found the deepest, biggest colony of brooding octopus on the planet. Is this rare? We don't know because we don't get to explore and see things like this all the time. Are there bigger ones? Maybe. But for now, this is the biggest one that we know of. Look at them, all of them covering eggs, protecting their eggs before they hatch. It's cold down there. It's deep. That's why it takes so long for them to hatch. Then we're going to get kind of a cool view here in a second. So there's a little kind of ledge where they're all covering that ledge. And then we're going to get an above view. So you'll see Argus using its camera to look down on Hercules and document what Hercules is seeing right now. So we're going to see that view switch in a second. You'll get to see what that looks like. So that's Hercules. You can see the basket on the front. Taking a nice close look. And there we go. That's Argus up top looking down on Hercules. So getting that view. As you can see, just that little beam of light and nothing but darkness. And then if you look really closely, we didn't have a thermometer on board, so we weren't able to test the water that day. But when you look really closely, you can see the water is shimmering. That means the water is a little bit warmer. So deep within that seamount, there is still heat being released from the earth. And that's why all those octopuses were there with their eggs, because it's a little bit warmer than the surrounding water, and it'll help speed up just a little bit the development of their eggs. So that is pretty cool. All right, the last thing I'm going to share with you before I take some questions is one of our last days. The weather got really rough. We got hit by a big storm, big swell. So this room here is a special room where we could go and we could do live events with classrooms all over the world and show them what we were doing on the ship. So that's what the room looks like normally. After the storm and the big waves, that's what the room looked like. It got smashed up pretty good. And even the next day, this video will show you what the sea looks like. So it's beautiful blue sky, but you can see how much the swell is still there, how much the ship is still moving. So look how far it tilts. And now it's going to go all the way up the other way. So as you can imagine, we had to be really careful and make sure that things were tied down, dishes were safe, because the ship is moving a lot. All right. Okay, so that is what I wanted to share with you today. A different mission, still doing research like we're doing on the Darwin 200, but looking at a different part of the ocean, exploring the deep sea. We were really interested in what was going on in the deep sea. This was a 3-week expedition. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, we got to explore places that nobody had ever explored before. So I do see some questions in the chat. We'll take a few questions and then we'll wrap up with our curiosity of the week. Okay, let's see. So Levi wants to know, how many octopus could you see moving? You know what? As far as we could see, as far as the light could reach, everywhere we pointed the light, and as we drove well, I guess we call it flying, even though we're not really flying, but that's what we call it because that's the closest thing. But as we moved along the bottom, as far as we could see, everywhere we pointed the light, everywhere we went, we saw them. So my best guess is that there could have been 50,000, there could have been 100,000. We easily saw thousands and thousands of them, and we couldn't stay down much longer. We had to come back up. But since then, I think ships have gone out to visit that site at least 2 more times to take more pictures, take more videos, and explore it a little bit more. George W., how long was I on the ship? That was 3 weeks. So about 21 days I was on board the exploration vessel Nautilus. Harrison, how many eggs do they lay? I'm just going to be guessing because they were covering them the whole time. We couldn't see them, but I think each one had probably between 20 to 30 little kind of oval-shaped eggs that they were protecting. Margot, how big did the octopuses grow? I think they would have been similar in size. Remember that sea spider, that Pictogonan from the beginning? So maybe like if you had your ruler and it's about 30 centimeters, I think that's probably about the size that those octopus were growing. Favorite sea creature that I ever saw? That's really hard because I've been really lucky and I've seen a lot of really cool sea creatures. But if I had to pick one, well, I was kind of hoping I had a picture handy, but I don't. It might be one of my favorites is the weedy sea dragon. So if you haven't seen those before, look them up. Definitely in South Australia. They're very common. The leafy and the weedy sea dragon can be found in the waters around South Australia. But they're some of my favorites because they camouflage so well. They're so beautiful looking. They're related to the seahorse, but they look very different. And anytime you spot one and get to see one is pretty special. Maybe if I'm really quick, I can pull up a picture. I think I might have one on my Instagram. Let's see if I can find that really, really quick, and then I'll share it. Okay, this isn't a picture, but it's a video, so that's pretty good too. So give me a second here to share my screen one more time, and let's take a look at that together. Oops, that's the wrong button. Try that one more time. I want a Chrome tab. I want Instagram. There we go. So there we go. So here's what it looks like to be diving with a weedy sea dragon. Hopefully you can see it now. It camouflages very well with this kelp, but when it's out in the open like this, it's a bit easier to spot. And these are some of my favorites. And I think I probably showed you some of these videos maybe weeks ago, shortly after the ship left Australia, but that is definitely one of my favorites. You could swim by them 100 times and never notice them. I was very lucky to spot 3 of them on 2 different dives and to get some pictures and to get some video. So pretty cool looking. Okay, let's see. Let's come back to the main screen. There we go. I think that's all of our questions. So I am going to jump into our curiosity of the week. So let's take a look. We did have last week's curiosity. We had several right answers come in. We had lots of great guesses. But let me share my screen and let's take a look at the answer to last week's curiosity.
Back, everyone. Last week, I asked you to try and identify these two sheets. If you remember, they're golden, but I shined a light behind them and showed you that they're semi-transparent. Could you guess what they were? A couple of people did send in the right answers. They are mica, sheets of mica, a mineral that's widespread around the world in different rock formations and rock types, for example, granite. Big sheets of mica like this have very special properties. They are semi-transparent and they're extremely heat resistant. So for the last 200 years, sheets of mica like this have been mined and windows have been cut out. You can break flakes off and make them thinner and thinner and put them in the windows of furnaces. This is one of the most heat resistant, naturally occurring, transparent minerals on Earth that can be used for this purpose at least. So it's a perfect window for furnaces and ovens and things like that get really, really hot inside, but you need to look inside as well. So if you guessed mica, well done. Can you guess the identity of this week's curiosity? Let's find out now.
Okay, so we're going to find out very shortly what this week's curiosity is. We did, surprisingly, I thought that was a tricky one, but we did have a lot of correct answers come in. We had a lot of really good guesses, like a fish scale, sea glass, maybe it's some coral, shark tooth, is it kelp? So there were a lot of really good guesses. Several classes guessed it was mica or a sheet of mica. And so this week in Queensland, in Port Douglas, we have Mr. Coburn's crew who is going to get the prize. It is a $50 Amazon gift card. So congrats to that crew. But we did, like our group in Naracoorte, South Australia, who's hanging out with us, they had the correct guess as well amongst several guesses. So very good job to all the classes who guessed right. And big shout out to all the classes who guessed, because it doesn't hurt to take a guess, do a little research, and see what you find out. So we've got to wrap up for this week because we're running a little over time. A huge shout out to our classrooms for joining us, to those who are going to catch the recording on YouTube a little bit later. We'll be back. We've got 2 weeks together before we're going to take a break, because I will be in South Australia. I'll be in Cape Town with the ship. I'll be doing a bunch of filming in the field. So I'm going to have lots of cool stuff to share. So we might not be able to do something live from Australia. Maybe. We'll see what I can do. Maybe we can do something. I can figure something out and get the time zones right that we can make something happen. But for sure, the next 2 weeks we'll hang out before we take a little break. The last thing we need to do today is a shout out to our sponsors, our supporters, our partners, without whom we wouldn't be doing this right now. We wouldn't be sailing towards the coast of South Africa. We wouldn't be training young conservationists, and we wouldn't be doing science on board like Grant's seabird project. So huge shout out to those sponsors. NPS saved the day. I was going to end it without the new curiosity. Here we go. Let's get that before we leave. That's very important. Whew, close one. Video file. Curiosity new. Here we go. Oh, yeah, this is a cool one. This one comes right from the Oosterschedle. Jan Willem is the captain on board. So he helped us out with a curiosity. A special curiosity of the week right now. We have a special guest with us. And it's a little bit of a nautical theme that we have going here. So we have the ship's captain with us, Jan Willem, joining us. Jan, it's so great to have you joining us live today.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, nice to be here live.
All right. And so here we go. We have this item here. I'm going to go in nice and close here. We're going to look at it from a few different angles. This is our curiosity of the week. What is this? You want to send a message. You have 1 week to send us a message to classroom@darwin200.com. And then, yeah, we're going to see what those answers are. I'm so glad that we have the captain holding it, because it's a very important instrument on the ship. There's only one of them, and it is fragile. So, yeah, it's nice to have a professional showing us our curiosity of the week. Okay, so there we go. That curiosity was filmed when I was on for a leg sailing between Peru and Ecuador. So we filmed that curiosity so that we could use it later. So that's our curiosity of the week. Send in your answers to classroom@darwin200.com. You have 1 week for that, 2 weeks for the crest seed experiment. And then we'll have a new curiosity and a new experiment next week as well. All right. Well, again, a huge shout out to the classrooms who joined us today, those who will be tuning in later. And we're going to sign off with a shout out to our partner supporters and collaborators. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. See you, everyone.